I wonder what they thought. Maybe they thought nature was a sculptor and this was nature's sculpture gallery. These shapes and forms. I think the whole world of the cave must have fascinated them almost as an alternative form of nature. You know, trees that grow the wrong way round that are made of stone. That can create music. Listen. It sounds fanciful, but it is actually possible that this was used by those people as a musical instrument. Some of these have been cut. And there's another cave not far from here where they've actually found a flute that has been shaped from the end of one of these formations.
When you're in a cave and the art is surrounding you, you really appreciate you're not dealing with individual paintings, you're dealing with a whole experience. And then if you also think that that art has probably been seen when there's singing going on and dancing going on. So you've got this whole multimedia experience within a cave.
Now, this is the most spectacular part of the cave. It's called the Hall of the Horses. This great cavern deep, deep, deep under the earth. It's hot in here. I came in cold and now I'm hot. And look at that. That horse has been created, painted, almost sculpted, again, using the relief of the rock to accentuate the forms of the horse. It reminds me of the Elgin marbles, the Parthenon frieze. Reminds me of what Picasso said when he first saw cave art. He said, 40,000 years, what have we learned? How far have we advanced as artists? We've learned nothing, we've advanced not a bit. There's another one here, up here. Again, it might almost be moving. You could touch that animal's flank and you'd feel that the stone has become flesh, because the way the artist's drawn the animal, he's modelled the muscles where the rock comes out, so you could feel those muscles. But what's amazing is the dating. These horses were created 30,000 years ago. And this, my little Elgin marble, my little Picasso horse over here, this was created 13,000 years ago. In other words, for 17,000 years minimum, these hunter-gathering people of the Ice Age, for 17,000 years, they sustained a culture sufficiently unified that during that course of time, they still felt impelled to come into the cave with their torches and to create on its wall the image of the horse. How do you explain the extraordinary immediacy and vividness of the cave painters' representations of animals like the horse? Well, I've been trying to think of a modern equivalent. I say modern, I'm talking 200 years ago, but it's like that in terms of the vast eons of time we're discussing. This is by George Stubbs, and it's Whistle Jacket. And in some respects, it's a work of art that does seem to reach back to that distant past, to prehistory. If you look at how Stubbs has painted it, he's placed the animal on a blank canvas, almost as if on the wall of a cave. And how has he achieved this sensational, stunning, startling realism and feeling of actuality, well, Stubbs spent months and months and months of his life dissecting horses, understanding their bodies, their bone structure, their flesh. He understood its tendons, its veins, its eyes, so that he could summon it up in paint. But isn't that exactly what the ancient hunter-gatherers did, in effect? They tracked horses, they shot horses, they butchered horses. In effect, they anatomized horses. They knew the animals they painted even more intimately than Stubbs, and perhaps that's why their representations of animal nature have really, it's an extraordinary thing to say, but they really have never been surpassed. Equaled maybe, but never surpassed.
I mean, you can look at some of the technical excellence and the expressive excellence and just be staggered by what you see.
When John Berger says that remarkable phrase that when art is born like a foal. It can walk and run straight away.
Preparations for the show are now in full swing, so I've come back to the British Museum to see how they're getting on. Now, this is one of the star objects in the show, the image of a woman carved from a piece of mammoth tusk in France 23,000 years ago. Now, when objects like this were first discovered by the Victorians, they were regarded as primitive porn. But I don't see them in that light. I think they're much gentler, much more celebratory than that. What I see when I look at this figure is the distillation of the idea of the perfectly fertile woman. The head is relatively unemphasized, the breasts are pendulous, the belly rounded, and the hips broad. And interestingly enough, Picasso, at the start of the 20th century, had a replica of this sculpture in his studio. And I think it keyed into his ambition, his stated desire to create a work of art that would somehow distill the essence of female humanity. So maybe he was right, in a way. This is Ice Age Cubism.
Curator Jill Cook had obviously been hard at work, and I was keen to see what other gems she'd managed to assemble.
We finished this last week with the French curators who bought the objects.
My eye's drawn to this horse.
Yes, it's wonderful to have it here. It's a beautiful piece.
They were all found in the same cave?
Yep. But even more special than that, they were placed within a setting of horse jaws.
Actual horse jaws?
Actual horse jaws. So the skeletal jaws were placed, and then these were positioned within that structure.
It suggests almost some form of ritual. Or...
Who knows? We don't know. But it's just fascinating to see this very special structure.
It makes me wonder whether it's the image of a horse, or the god of horse.
Well, yes, we can imagine all sorts of things.
What about these two?
These two here are from an area within another cave, and just inside the entrance, where you've got plenty of daylight still, there's a group of about 80 fragments of sculpture, plus stone tools used to create them, in a very specific area, so very tight distribution.
So what does that suggest to you?
It's a workshop, it's a sculptor's workshop.
So we've not just got art, we've got an artist's studio.
Yeah. And these pieces are from among about 80 fragments in various stages of work. So
do you think this might be unfinished? This might be a work in progress?
They're works in progress, or perhaps works that they broke.
Rejects?
Rejects that they left on the floor of this little workshop. So this person who was sculpting these things, had their setup, their special area within the cave.
It's fascinating. It suggests very much the idea of the specialised craftsman, the person who's got the time to work, perhaps a workshop of people, a specialised group of people, hunters over there, artists over here.
Once you start looking at them in detail and think how complicated they are to make, the hours and the skill that presupposes, I mean, that person, the maker, clearly is not spending that time on something else. So you already have a community with a caste or a class or a group of people doing very specialist, non-utilitarian things.
It's clear the Ice Age not only heralded the birth of art, but also the dedicated craftsman, the skilled artist. I was keen to hear the thoughts of a living artist on this work. Antony Gormley agreed to join me for a look. Not only is he one of the world's best-known sculptors, famous for creating totemic standing figures, he also studied archaeology and anthropology.
I'm just so lucky to have done that. I mean, in terms of contextualising in a way what one might learn at art school with a first-hand experience of objects made in deep history. I mean, I have to say, I am bowled over by the monumentality of these works in spite of their size. They carry such authority, such breathtaking identification with the animals that human beings shared the world with then. The fact that human populations were tiny and animal populations were enormous, and that sense of reverence of being another creature alive with these extraordinarily vital animals. I think that we need to remember that art was an essential tool. It wasn't just spears and scrapers. Our populations were so small, were threatened by ice, by immediate freezing over of all of the things that we need to sustain ourselves, that art was the thing that provided the vehicle, imaginatively, for us to believe in our own survival.